Okay, so, all right, let's see here.
And go.
Scotchy, scotch. Watch it go down into the belly. That's good scotch. You can smell it. Smells like wood and fields and axes. Hello, this is Melinda Mock, an ex-motorcycle cop, injured in the line of duty, now a retro troubleshooter. She's been recruited for a top-secret government mission to ride Street Hawk, an all-terrain attack podcast designed to fight hipster crime, capable of incredible speeds of up to 300 jokes an hour and immense firepower. Only one man, federal retro agent Aaron Harper, knows Melinda Mock's true identity: the woman, the machine, Street Hawk.
Wow, that's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, so, the rest is up to you.
I mean, great.
Hopefully I can edit that together into something that sounds okay. Like, my cold is definitely making that harder to do.
Well, I mean, what would life be if it weren't for challenges?
Yeah. Fun, maybe?
Learning opportunities.
Oh, right.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Dreamland, the RetroBlasting podcast. I am Melinda.
And I am Aaron.
And today we are talking about the 1985 show Street Hawk.
Hawk. I prepared for the Encyclopedia Britannica episode.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, so just to give you a high-level overview, this show was originally called Falconer. And honestly, if it had been called that, I think it would have been a huge mistake, because I would have expected it to be like, what was that movie with the Falcons?
Sorry.
Jesus Christ.
What was that movie with the Falcons?
Yeah, with the Lady Hawk.
Oh, yeah. I don't think I've ever
hawks.
seen that, yeah.
But apparently that title was taken by a different pilot. So it aired for 13 episodes in 1985. It wasn't a mid-season replacement, but it was because it was originally intended to start in the fall of 84. But ABC executives changed their minds because a summer series called Call to Glory did pretty well, so they continued it on. And so this show sort of started in January of 1985.
Yeah, I think it was designed to take over after the pro football had stopped.
Possibly. So just to sort of set the stage on this, Knight Rider had come out in September of 1982 and continued on through 1986. And that was on NBC. Airwolf came out in January of 84 and went through 87. This was ABC's response to the other two main networks, because anyone who remembers that time remembers that those were the three networks, and they were constantly battling with each other.
Oh, yeah, and I watched, Knight Rider and Airwolf nonstop. I mean, those were some of my favorite shows, and I really don't remember Street Hawk.
Right. Well, I don't really either, although watching this episode, I feel like I remember seeing the ads for it.
Yeah.
I think my cousin was really into it, but I don't remember ever seeing the show. But it was only on from January to May of 1985. So it was the shortest-lived show, and there's a lot of reasons for that, which I guess we can talk about now if you want. The creator was a guy named Bob Wolterstorff.
Good. You did good.
Thank you. He felt like, this was in an interview on the website streethawkonline.com. It's a really good fan site, has a lot of good interviews and information kind of all compiled together. So if you're interested, they actually have a huge forum section that was fairly active even last year. So
yeah, it sounds like there's a fairly rabid fan base for this. And there's a lot of people who would love to see a rebirth of Street Hawk.
Certainly the lead actor, Rex Smith.
And I know I say this all the time with a lot of these things that I didn't see in the 80s. Like, I always approach them thinking they're going to be silly. Mm-hmm. But I oddly found myself enjoying this show in spite of the fact that I don't think it's practical to use a motorcycle as a crime defense mechanism.
Oh, yeah. Thinking of it as a show for kids. If you thought of it as a show, like a drama show that kids could watch with their parents, like Knight Rider was. Because, I mean, Knight Rider's ridiculous, too. Let's be honest. It's really ridiculous. It was just
too cool. Like, we all still want our phones to sound like that. Aaron, you need more brand.
Maybe that's what this show lacked, was the motorcycle needed its own personality.
Well, they did a pretty good job, and we're jumping a little bit ahead, but the casting of the science guy, it's not Bill Nye, it was like OG science guy. He was kind of cool. He was kind of nebbish and nerdy, but he was not pandering to nerds all the time. Sometimes he did. They went a little overboard, but especially when he's trying to rewire the control board. Oh,
God, we got to get to that. Okay, so the executive producer and creator, Bob Wolterstorff, felt like the show got canceled because they were put up against Dallas on a Friday night. So they didn't have the greatest time slot. The highest they ever came in was number 2.
And honestly, I was watching Dallas when this was on.
Were you?
Point, yeah.
I've never watched one episode of that show.
That's amazing.
Is it?
I don't want to spoil anything for you.
I think someone
but
gets killed.
There's a question.
Who kills someone?
Yeah, it was all over billboards and T-shirts. It was like, got milk. Who shot JR?
It's kind of like, where's the beef?
Yeah, where's
There's a lot of questions from the 80s that went unanswered.
I know, and I feel like they were not difficult questions to answer. Why is that? We need to get to the bottom of it now.
Well, so what I think is interesting about this show, along with the other 2 shows, is that Knight Rider, Airwolf, and Street Hawk were all actually made by the same production company. So like we talked about with Moonlighting, hey, look, I'm referencing ourselves.
Feels pretty good.
They typically had production companies who would make shows and then sell them to networks. So it wasn't like ABC, normally, aside from Moonlighting, did not make their own shows for their own network. They would buy them off of production companies.
Right.
So all 3 of these shows were made by Universal Television Productions. So they were all on the same lot at the same time, all filming simultaneously because they all completely overlap.
Which means we missed a huge opportunity, and I'm sure it's because they sold these shows to different networks.
Yes.
For a crossover.
Oh, absolutely.
How cool. I mean, I guess we're all used
cool.
to it with the Marvel Universe kind of merging and then dispersing, but to like something Street Hawk couldn't handle. I'll get you next time, Gadget. And then all of a sudden Airwolf shows up for backup or something. I mean,
how amazing would that be?
Yeah.
Like the Avengers of vehicles or whatever.
The Vehicle Avengers.
Yeah, the Vehicle Avengers. The motorcycle, just to kind of talk about that a little bit, it was based on a 1983 Honda XL 500 trail bike. But the motorcycle, that was in the pilot episode. The motorcycles used in the rest of the series were based on an 84 Honda XR 500. So probably fairly similar, but maybe a little bit different. Apparently, that was one of the problems with this show, is that the stunts really took a heavy toll on the motorcycles. So when they were constantly jumping these motorcycles, the bikes would in reality land and break apart into like a bunch of pieces. I
mean, it sounds like, just from watching some of the interviews, that they were basically taping some of these props onto the bike to make it work. So they had one that they never wrecked, right? It was the pretty one that was on the Lazy Susan. Mm-hmm. And then they had some that were literally just like Velcroed together, and they were intended to fly apart.
Right. The show creator had said that apparently they had around 30 extra motorcycles because they kept getting destroyed. The motorcycle was designed by an artist named Andrew Probert, who also worked on the Enterprise for the Star Trek the Motion Picture and the Enterprise D for Next Gen. He also contributed to the 1978 Battlestar Galactica Cylons, and he...
Wow, what an iconic look.
Right?
You can make those into cell phones, and I would buy them. Like more than one. I'd have like 15 cell phones.
And then he did parts on the Airwolf helicopter and also the DeLorean time machine, which these were all things that were happening around 1984,
Way to bury the lead.
Right?
And then I think someone named Ron Cobb took over for the series on designing and keeping the bike up to speed.
Yeah. Well, this guy has an interview, Andrew Probert had an interview on that website, the Street Hawk online website.
Yeah, Street Cod is a different
It's
website.
a different Street Cod. It's about a
it's
fish.
About tough fish.
It's about...
He's like, where's my money?
You'll sleep with my siblings tonight.
Yeah. Join me in the ocean.
Cut that joke. It's terrible.
No, it's great. Leave it.
It's so bad.
I love how you're talking to an editor that is literally you.
Listen, I don't want to giggle too much.
Oh.
Hey, don't read the criticisms. Anyway.
No, never do.
this guy was talking about how a lot of his original concepts didn't make their way into the show as he intended, because they had this big requirement that the Street Hawk be able to go from a dirt bike to a racing system, which is really hard, like from an engineering perspective, to pull that off. So he had tried to suggest that the bike morph from one to the other, and he had designed this super shaft drive unit that would have covered the difference between the chain drive dirt bike skeleton and the shaft drive street bike skeleton. Try to say that really fast. Along with all these enclosed racing wheels to further establish the bike's capabilities. But they insisted...
In the pilot, they kind of show that they were going down that path through some of the development.
They do with
the animations.
Animation, exactly.
Yeah, you see the bike actually extend the wheels out and some of the other things inside
and like
change.
Raise the suspension up a little bit or
and then
lower.
The diagrams for the status of how, because it's really cool. They have this cool little diagram where and everything lights up a different color based on how the bike is doing. It's clear that it's a shaft-driven bike in that diagram, but it's a chain-driven bike when it's off-road. So they definitely had some interesting challenges there. Yeah,
I mean, if you know anything about bikes, you're probably hyper aware that they're constantly changing bikes from shot to shot, like within an action sequence.
And I didn't. It was always a world I couldn't. My parents were very anti-motorcycle, so it wasn't like I was ever going to have a dirt bike. And I didn't understand the total appeal of dirt biking. I thought everybody just looked like bonkers with all of their protective gear on. They're just orange and yellow and red.
Explain what that means.
Bonkers. You don't remember bonkers?
I do.
It was that candy with like the different color filling on the inside and then like another color filling on the outside. They were always bright primary colors.
They felt like they were going to like rip your fillings out or rip your teeth out.
Yeah, that was why they were designed by dentists to create work. And they had some of the coolest commercials on when I remember seeing the ads and just wanting to go buy a pack of bonkers.
I do remember eating a lot of them. Yep.
But yeah, watching this television pilot kind of made me understand a little more about just like, man, I really kind of want to ride that bike.
Yeah. Well, this guy, he says that when they insisted on the wild wheels because they look cool, that's in quotes, because they look cool, he thinks that it diminished the believability of Street Hawk. So,
and they suffered a lot for that.
Yeah.
I mean, like, for example, I watched a few more episodes of this to prepare for the show. There's a scene that opens, you were laughing about it earlier. It was kind of like a clip of it in the interview where he goes through the big window and there's the people in front of that like Dallas era car with their giant dirty hairy guns. Well, right before that scene happens,
jumps right through this giant plate glass window. It's amazing.
Yeah, he doesn't get impaled by the metal frames or just right through it. Right before that happened, he was creeping up on this warehouse. So there's this scene of him just sort of like easing his way through a field, and then the camera goes back to the warehouse, and you see him off in the distance, and you just hear this wee 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 wee. Like I just have to imagine that in LA,
there's nothing menacing about that at all.
Well, and it's not stealthy. I mean, he's sitting there just in this sort of anonymous black suit, going. He's talking to his guy back at the base, and that's the point where my adult brain was going, this is not going to work. These people are paranoid. They're not going to just be like, I hear Street Hawk.
The creator, Bob Wolterstorff, he's not the creator of all things. He's just the creator of the show.
Yeah, I was not confused about that.
Okay.
But that would be oddly Discordian. Just like...
You've got to get the KLF out of your head, man.
I can't. It's tattooed on the inside of my eyelids now.
The creator, Bob Wolterstorff, says the change from the pilot bike to the series, as far as he could remember, losing the laser and adding a machine gun per ABC. That was like the biggest change that they did. So in this pilot episode that we watched, there was a laser gun that came out of the motorcycle.
It sounded like the robots from the black hole.
Yeah, but later on it becomes a machine gun, which I guess you saw if you watched more episodes.
Yeah. There's a great scene where he walks into the control room and his science guy, I can't remember his name, Tuttle, right?
Yeah, Norman Tuttle.
Is sitting there behind this like 50 cal with ear protection on, and he's shooting towards the door where you come into the room into like a bunch of bales of hay.
That seems safe.
And so you have Mock come in the door and walk by like, oh my goodness, what are you doing? And I remember just thinking, the entrance is downrange from the gun. This is just not...
I mean, it seems like you would hear the gun.
Yeah, he was totally surprised. I mean, he's just like, whoa.
Really good soundproofing in that room.
A 50 caliber.
Yeah. the guy says one of the big problems was the battery life for the lights and the other equipment that was on the bike, because they had a very short lifespan and basically had to be replaced after every scene.
Wow.
So all of the lights and all the stuff that were on there had their little tiny individual batteries. I don't know if it was Duracells or what they were using, but at any rate, they would die. So they were constantly having to change all of those. And then they would also fly apart, like if they did a major stunt with the bike.
I was trying to figure out if those were fluorescents or that was a different kind of light than I'm used to seeing. It looked almost like a modern day sort of epoxy LED style, like molded plastic light on the front. But I know that wasn't the case. It had to be either incandescent or fluorescent or something like that. Mm-hmm. And we were not good at light and batteries back then.
Knight Rider had toys, which we have some of them. I don't think Airwolf did, but I could be wrong about that. This show did not have toys in America, but they did actually, even though it was so short-lived, I guess that was like something they must have been cooking up from the very beginning, because they did come out with Street Hawk toys in Brazil by Glasslight, and they had a slot track with 2 slot bikes, and they also had a Jesse Mach action figure. And in the UK, they had a stunt bike that was released by Ertl, and it was roughly the same size as a miniature Ertl vehicle, and it had a little plastic rider, and the packaging suggested various stunts that the owner could attempt to perform.
I always liked toys that did that. That gave you a little head start.
Yeah,
things you
it's
could
kind of
try.
like when you buy one of those really cool like scarves, and then they like show you different ways to like tie your scarf.
Yeah.
Probably not the best
Don't
example.
have an analog for that. I really don't. I kind of want one of these Funk School toys, though.
The fun school, yeah.
I like Funk School.
Funk School.
Yeah, Fun School.
Yeah, they were the company that was doing G.I. Joe in India. They gave
repaint.
basically the G.I. Joe, they gave it a black paint job and replaced the sidecar with Snake Eyes wearing a silver visor and sold it under Street Hawk's name. So they basically just
Those
repurposed.
would probably be pretty cool to find, to know that it's a repaint job on a Snake Eyes.
I'll have to go on and put them in the show notes.
Like, talk about an
pictures.
even harder Snake Eyes to find.
Right. A couple of other notes before we start talking about this pilot episode, which was just pretty hilarious, by the way. In Argentina, the show was released as The Fantastic Motorcycle, which implies that it was part of a franchise that included The Fantastic Car, which was Knight Rider,
Nice.
and The Fantastic Helicopter, which was Airwolf.
So they had the Avengers that I wanted in Argentina.
Well, they at least had the idea that they were all part of, but they didn't really have crossovers.
That's too bad. It's not like they got different episodes. I know.
The show creator says that the pilot chase scene in the sewer was inspired by the Star Wars scooter chase.
That's like saying that Sylvester Stallone was considered for a role in the 80s. I mean, it's
just dumb, right? And then, apparently, the other weird thing is that Honda sued them, the show creators and Universal, for $250 million for violation of their copyright on their Nighthawk motorcycle.
Really?
But they dropped the suit when the show got canceled.
It is not obvious unless you are a bike nut that is a Honda motorcycle. It's covered up with so much stuff.
It's got so many like weird parts sort of taped or glued
Literally
over
taped onto the side of it.
Right. So let's talk about this pilot.
What about the music?
The music?
Yeah, Tangerine Dream.
Yeah.
They're a well-loved band.
Can I just say the only experience really that I have with Tangerine Dream is the movie Legend.
Yeah.
And the American version of the movie Legend, because apparently that was a whole big thing with that movie, which maybe we should do a podcast about. But Legend, when it was originally done, had a completely different score. And when it was released outside the U.S., it did have a different score.
Wow.
Jerry Goldsmith did
Wow.
the score. And it wasn't considered
Was it bad,
edgy
or-
enough. No,
Okay.
it just, they wanted to give it something a little different to make it more competitive in the market. And so he wasn't super thrilled about that, which I don't blame him.
No, you put a lot of work into that stuff.
But I have the other cut of the film, that's the UK cut, I believe, it's a completely different cut of the movie, and it's got his score, which
Wow.
is very weird because I've seen that movie so many times. It's weird to see it with a different score, but
I felt like the Tangerine Dream, it was hard, especially if you start with the pilot, like you probably should. They didn't have the budget for, later on they get Bruce Springsteen and lots of popular stuff that's
Do
on the
they
radio.
really?
Oh yeah, there's
Nice.
other radio hits peppered in to the movie. I mean, or to the TV show. They talk about how expensive it was. It was like $1 million or more per episode. They were sparing no expense on getting this. But you get hammered by that Tangerine Dream song, and it's not bad. but you just hear it so
it's not
much
good.
in that pilot. And it feels like, if you've seen Dune, the Brian Eno Toto kind of soundtrack that it had, and you mash it together with Mannheim Steamroller, and you get this sort of thing that happens in Street Hawk is kind of how I felt about it.
I feel like it's not that far off from the Airwolf score.
Yeah, and I haven't heard that in a long time.
Synthy, This show, as I was watching it, I was reminded of a couple of things. One was...
that you needed to buy eggs. Yeah, I know how this works.
One was the Mystery Science Theater Riding with Death, which anyone who's a huge Misty fan out there, you'll be very familiar. There was just a lot of car and motorcycle chases and stuff, and it felt like late 70s, even though this was filmed in 80. I assume this was filmed in late 84 if it came out in 85.
Yeah, there was liberal use of like the empty wood crate, like veggie crate.
Yeah, there were numerous times where there would be a chase scene beginning, and then you just see, as they're rounding a corner, a ton of just big cardboard boxes stacked really tall, a whole bunch of them, or a bunch of empty crates, and then some loose vegetables sitting around.
Just cabbage
and you're like,
bell pepper.
gee, I wonder what's going to happen. And every single time,
they just drive a Ford Time Lord right through it.
And just vegetables, bell peppers galore. So
that's how salsa's made.
I wrote, the first thing I write under this, it says, "Holy crap, the truck that houses the motorcycles at the beginning."
Oh my gosh. So how cool would you have been if you owned that truck in 1984?
There's a big black pickup truck. I don't know what kind of pickup truck because I'm not a truck person.
It looks kind of like a Bronco.
Yeah.
But with a lot of modifications.
It's like a monster truck looking thing. But then on top of that, they have one of those conversion kits where you can cover the bed of your truck with like a top.
With like a full house.
With like a full house that actually stuck up. I can't talk today. It's a problem. It went higher than the roof or the cab of the truck.
Oh, yeah.
It was
enormous.
way higher. It was really tall.
It felt like something that would have pulled up to Elliot's house in E.T., or in Stranger Things that would have chased those kids. It felt like a federal
Or in
agent.
Back to the Future where he had the big giant monster truck at the end.
Yes.
The big black.
That's totally different. That one was literally just too cool.
Yeah. That one was cool. And it
truck.
didn't have a house built on the back of it.
No, the back of that truck was for something.
It needed a chimney coming out. It was ridiculous. And so at the beginning, this truck rolls out, and then the back door opens, and these two dirt bikes come wheeling out the back of it.
Yeah, like with two like twin Rufios on top of them.
Yeah. And they basically are chasing this van, and they cause the van to do one of those classic 80s stunts where, I don't know how they do this, but they do it numerous times in this one episode.
Where one wheel hits
a ramp, and so it kind of jumps, and it spins sideways, so it kind of starts twisting, and then it lands on the front, like right where the driver and passenger are sitting in the front of this van. And I mean, you can see that the whole front gets completely crushed. Anybody that was in there would have freaking died instantly. It would have been horrible. I mean, it's not like you have airbags. No. It's just like, no way anyone's living through that. But of course, in this, they cut away and then they cut back, and it's right back on its four tires somehow.
And the cab
and the people are just
crushed.
Sitting there just kind of like, oh man, that really kind of...
Ow.
Ouch. Owie.
Ow. My bones.
And this is where they're being pursued by the old classic police cars that we kept calling the Ford Time Lord. If you haven't listened to the KL episode, you won't get that. But anyway, anyway, that happens, and then the cops show up, and the reporters are all there, and this is where there was the really weird comment. There's the lady who is the PR agent, who is the lady. I just call her Lady. In my notes.
She gets replaced in the next episode.
Right. But she's the female lead in the show, and she's standing there talking to a reporter who happens to be African-American, and he says, I need some more, give me some more details on what's going on. I need more color.
Yeah.
And it was just really awkward the way he said it. And then she says, find a girl in a bikini. And I'm like, That didn't translate to now very
I just
well.
see somebody with a cigarette and a highball, and he's just, that's a great line. Put it in there. All right, now let's move on to the next one. We got that
Very
joke.
Mad Men, apparently.
Yeah. It would not play the same today for sure.
No, it was just very awkward and weird. So they cut to Chakotay.
Yeah. And he's just like,
Who looks weirdly, Chakotay, I don't remember the actor's name, so I'm a terrible person, but he was in Voyager. He was the
That's a Star Trek show.
Native American dude in... I don't think he actually is Native American, though, is he?
I couldn't tell you. To me, he's always felt like a Hispanic baseball player for some reason. Like if you were to put him,
very Eric Estrada.
Yeah,
to
if
me,
you
he
were to
looks
put him in a,
just like
an umpire or a
for a
team
half second,
manager.
I literally thought he was because he was wearing a cop uniform, and I was like, "Is this Chips? What am I watching?"
He did. He felt like that.
Yeah.
And the dude just got this like smile that could light up a room, especially at his younger age before he's just burned on all that space stuff. Stuck out there in that galaxy for.
That's
so long.
right. Well, Chakotay, I realized I didn't know how to spell Chakotay, but apparently I spelled it right because my Microsoft Word didn't even underline it or anything.
I just think it's cool that that's in the dictionary at Microsoft.
Things you learn by listening to our podcast.
Yeah.
So they're doing this thing called the first annual harbor jump.
But they're not jumping over a harbor.
Nope. It's at the harbor, I think.
Yeah.
And
like a
they
junkyard
have a
or
Hitachi boombox. And you think that they're going to play some cool, like, modern tune, but I guess they couldn't get the rights to that. So they play, what is that?
I think the presidential march or something. That's
that. And then Jesse Mock shows up with this Evel Knievel outfit. He's on a dirt bike.
He's got an American flag helmet and like a red
cape. Capelet.
Yeah, it's a little cape.
It's a capelet.
He had the same problems Batman did. They had
he
to have a short cape so it wouldn't get tangled up in the wheels.
Sure. So he comes in and he jumps over like 5 police cars on this bike. And apparently they were taking bets on whether or not he could accomplish that. And it's all very exciting. And then there's this guy up in the sidelines where you can't see him creepily filming this whole thing.
Do
like
you
a stalker.
remember like
being
in
stalked?
high school
Yes.
or we're not going to go there today, but when you were in high school.
It wouldn't be Dreamland if we didn't go somewhere really dark
like
inappropriately.
Murdery. Yeah. It seemed like every mom had one of those gigantic VHS camcorders.
Oh, yeah.
Back then. And it was like a bazooka.
We did.
Yeah. And so he's literally standing up on this like oil derrick or something. And he's just sort of like nodding approvingly as he's, approaching this jump and then kind of shaking his head.
He's a guy from Murphy Brown. Like it's literally all I can think of when I see him is sort of like one of not the announcer guy from Murphy Brown, but the other guy that was on Murphy Brown. And
this is Tuttle, right?
Norman Tuttle is
the engineer who designed.
He's the designer for Street Hawk, but we don't know that at this point. He's just sort of standing there creepily filming like a stalker, and it's like, what is this all about? Anyway, so these guys all get in trouble for, goofing off on the clock because they're all on the clock, when they're supposed to be protecting and serving the public.
No, LA's fine.
Taking bets on whether a guy can jump over a bunch of police cars with a motorcycle. Seems like something you should get in trouble for. But anyway, the chief does the standard thing, Lethal Weapon style, where he hauls them into his office and yells at them, and he suspends them for 2 weeks to set an example.
Your mouth's writing checks, your backside can't cash.
Yeah, exactly. You're getting too old for this. Anyway.
And except he says, but.
Yep.
He doesn't actually even say that.
Nope, he doesn't say that at all.
It's out of control. I've lost touch with reality.
So Norman Tuttle, then they cut to him and he's talking to his boss in a boardroom and trying to say, he doesn't want to work with this loose cannon like Jesse Mock. He's got the footage and he's showing it to his boss, and his boss is like, this guy's the greatest. You have to. He is definitely the guy we need for this project, the special undercover project, Street Hawk. And Norman's like, I don't want him to mess up my equipment. I'm very protective of my equipment.
He liked that word equipment a lot.
He said equipment like 500 times. Mm-hmm. Listen, all I'm saying is if you're going to watch this pilot of this show, you need to do a drinking game where every single time he says the word equipment, you take a shot. Mm-hmm. The show will be a lot better. You may pay for it later, but it might be worth it. I'm just saying.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Anyway, then they have these two guys, the two Chakotay and Jesse Mock. By the way, it's not Mock like my last name.
Nope.
It's Mock like Mach 7 or whatever, like MACH Mock.
Yeah.
Which I assume
no
is
confusion
reference
about
to
that.
the speed because he's fast.
His name was a little on the nose.
It's super on the nose. So they have a ripoff of the Footloose music. So I feel like in this pilot episode, they had mostly Tangerine Dream music, and then I don't know if Tangerine Dream did these other songs, but there were a couple of times, and this was one of them, where they had this other music that would come in that was clearly referencing a very popular song at the time.
Yeah, it was very close to it,
but it
not
wasn't
quite.
Exactly it. But you're like,
But it wasn't Saved by the Bell bad.
Yeah,
pretty bad.
It was pretty bad. So they have that Footloose fake music playing, and it shows Chakotay and Jesse getting ready to go for a dirt bike race to blow off some steam because they just got put on suspension for doing stunts. Anyway, talking is hard. In the meantime, they awkwardly, this is where this thing started in this episode. And when I was trying to take a lot of notes, I felt like I was taking so many extra notes because they edited so much.
Yeah.
Did you notice the pacing of the episode is very weird because they don't have very long scenes to develop anything. It's like, it's almost modern in the sense of the scenes are just choppy and they cut back and forth between completely unrelated things. Sometimes for like very short clips, like right here, they cut from the guys getting ready to go on their race to another scene that's set out in the desert where the big giant black truck that we talked about and a private plane are out in the desert somewhere just meeting up. And this is where our villain shows up, which is Doc from Back to the Future.
Yeah, how unexpected for a pilot to have that guy just show up and be the bad guy.
I know. So
wearing a fur coat.
Why is his name not coming to my mind?
Christopher Lloyd.
Yeah, Christopher Lloyd is the villain in this show. So I was trying to do the math because I was like, this has got to be right around the time of Back to the Future. There's no way after Back to the Future is such a success.
Well, Universal, right?
Yeah,
and they
Universal.
would have been on the same lots. So.
But we were crunching the dates, and apparently I would guess that this was filmed right before filming started on Back to the Future because Back to the Future came out early July of 1985.
So this is right between Taxi and Back to the Future.
This pilot aired in January of 1985. Originally, it was supposed to air in the fall of 1984. So I don't know if they filmed in mid-1984 or late 1984. But anyway, I believe filming on Back to the Future started in January, like right around the time the show actually came out. So he wasn't... I think he had already done Star Trek 3, right?
He was so good in that.
Yeah. It's a weird, very short scene, though, because he gets out of this truck wearing this big fur coat, and then there's this plane, and you don't understand who any of these people are or what they're doing, then it cuts right back to Jesse and his friend Chakotay, like, takes off and leaves him. He's like, I'm giving myself a head start, and he takes off.
And he sabotaged his bike.
And Jesse's bike doesn't start, and so he's out there with his tools trying to get his bike to start, and...
Yeah, he's just hammering on it with a socket wrench.
Norman...
Like you do.
Norman, whatever is... Tuttle,
yeah.
Shows up, and he's trying to talk him in weirdly. Doesn't set up a meeting. He just finds him, and he's like, I see you're really busy, but I'm going to try to talk to you about this very covert operations thing right in the middle of the crowd.
Let's talk about it right in the middle of this crowd.
Of people, right. They're talking. The gist of everything here is that Jesse finally gets the bike fixed. He says, no, I'm not interested. He takes off. And then he comes up upon his friend who has driven up on the plane and the truck meeting. Apparently, what the gist of the show is that they're getting drugs and money that were put into the police evidence department or whatever from drug busts and stuff.
Transferred to the Coast Guard.
And they're transferring, to different departments or whatever. And then during those transportation things that are supposedly top secret, these guys are stealing the cocaine and money from the police. And we later find out that it's because the police commissioner is in cahoots with Doc. I'm just going to keep calling him Doc because it's easier. They never really say his name until the end of the show. Right. Anyway, so they shoot Chakotay for coming up on them, And so Jesse, shortly thereafter, drives up and sees his friend dead. And he's like, oh, my God.
And then he looks to the left, and the big black truck is just coming at him.
For a really long time.
Yeah, and it slows down, and then it just kind of does one of those screen wipes as the grill gets really big in the TV. And the next shot, of course, is them airlifting him out of the desert on the end of a long rope. So
yeah, they have this like
MASH
stretcher.
did it better.
They had this stretcher that was like tethered to a helicopter by a long cable.
So that when they actually go to land somewhere, all of the static electricity is going to transfer straight down this cable, straight through the patient and into the ground.
The other there were a number of things that I noted, and maybe it's just because I'm a nurse, but I'm like, he just gets hit by a truck, right? Someone finds him. He doesn't have a neck brace on.
Nope, he's just mummified.
His head
on the
is just like flopping all around, which is, what you want after a major vehicle collision involving a motorcycle. You need those nerves
to be cleanly cut.
and then they cut to him in an ambulance. Again, his head is flopping all around. Then he gets inside the hospital, and they slam the stretcher into the two doors that swing open.
Could someone get the door? Could someone get the door? Then they just battering ram their, spinal
and his head like
patient.
goes, ah! Amazing. Then it fades to him getting out of a car with this cane, and he's really, really trying to sell this limp all the way through most of this episode. And he meets with his boss, who tells him that IA is doing this investigation, and he's like, "They're never gonna get it. They're never gonna figure out what happened. My friend is dead."
Yeah.
And then
does anyone care that it was a cop, or does that not matter anymore? It's just like angry acting 101 right there.
I think now might be an interesting time to talk about our lead actor, Rex.
Yes.
Something.
I kind of like this guy. Like
you do?
Yeah, watching the interview with him, he really sells that he's just kind of like a dad now.
He seems like a very, what he seems like? He seems like a dad, like down the street version of Dirk Benedict.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he looks a little bit like Face, not quite as hot as him. But he's so like
Face can look like anybody.
He just doesn't really seem like somebody was talking. I think it was the creator who was like
he was not well loved.
He wanted to cast originally. They wanted George Clooney in this
and he makes
role.
an appearance in the very next episode.
Yeah, apparently this show is what got George Clooney his SAG card. So
it was like his third appearance or second appeance. You have to have a certain number of those.
I think it's second or third anyway. And he had said, if I had gotten George Clooney to be the lead in this show, I would have already directed a feature by now. So
yeah, but that bothers me. Like, it's very, I want to ride someone else's coattails.
Yeah, well, I mean, the guy, if you read his interview on that website that I was telling you about, it's kind of cutting. Like, he makes several kind of cutting remarks.
I think that Rex was maybe a little green for this.
He
so he was
green.
Learning as he went.
His background was
he was a pop star.
He had been in Greece. He did a lot of musical type stuff, and he was in some sort of weird teeny bopper type of band.
Yeah, apparently he couldn't go to the mall without being swarmed.
He was in Tiger Beat.
Yeah,
all these like 15-year-old girls were like squealing and running around like. Ah!
So he wanted a serious role.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, once he gets on the uniform and the helmet, it looks pretty cool, I gotta say.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's not a lot of emoting to be done when you're wearing that helmet and uniform.
It's true. But I mean, Darth Vader looks pretty cool too.
Yeah, he does.
Helmets are awesome.
I agree.
Just saying.
I'm wearing one right now.
While you drink scotch.
Yeah.
Makes it really hard to drink. You gotta have a straw. Okay.
Spill it on the helmet. It's just like a constant odor.
So he finds out he's got to work in PR.
Yeah.
And so he goes and meets Lady.
That was not her name.
That was definitely her name. And she works in PR too. And you said at this point, there's something odd about her face.
Yeah, she almost looked... It's hard to put a finger on it. It's always dangerous territory to be critical of an actor or actress just strictly on appearance. But I felt like there was something, and I don't mean this in like a she's had surgery way, but there's something sort of plastic about the way she emotes. I mean, it may just be the over intensity when she's talking to him. Like she's always with the big eyes and the mouth.
She just has really big eyes.
Yeah. And
I can sympathize with that.
and the mouth was just like over emoting everything.
One time I went out on a first date with a guy, and the very first thing he said to me was, "Wow, your eyes are really big." And I was like,
and then you say, "And you have arms."
I was just like,
Where do we go from here?
where do we go from here?
Wow. Is that a Filter reference?
Thank you. No, it's a Buffy musical episode reference.
Okay.
The one you
my
hate.
brain went to that song by Filter.
They're talking about how neither one of them likes the fact that he's in PR. She doesn't like this. He doesn't like this. It's kind of a weird conversation, but they both say they're going to make the best of it. And then it cuts again.
They stepped on a really weird handicap joke there too, where she was explaining his job to him, and she just very insensitively goes, "Am I going too fast for you?"
She was literally walking like really fast too. While it was a walk and talk scene.
Yeah,
and she's like clip clopping in her heels, and he's like trying to walk quickly with this cane and his limp and everything. And she's like, "Oh, am I going too fast for you?" And I don't know if she intended it to be about the words or about the walking.
They didn't sell that joke very well. I think it was supposed to be, she was supposed to be insinuating that she was talking too fast.
I see.
And then realize awkwardly that she had just commented on how slow he walks.
You know what they say about if you have to explain a joke, right? I'm saying they didn't do a good job is all I'm saying.
It's cool. Meanie. We'll have to turn that up a little bit.
So, just leave it really awkward and silent. So it cuts to him carrying out his groceries and watching these motorcycle cops going by longingly. Like he's just like, "Oh, look at them. They're chasing a bad guy. I used to be able to do that, but you need both of your legs to be in the best shape possible to ride a motorcycle for some reason."
Because I can't put you out there. Your knee's a mess, said his boss.
It's
cool. He's got a grocery bag full of like cabbage and beer and sandwich bread, and he's ready to go home.
I think that you could probably like do a little physical therapy to strengthen your knee back up so that you could jump off your bike easier and you'd be fine. Like I guess I just don't understand why
they could have put him in a squad car. I mean, there's no reason he just had to go straight to PR. He could have still been a
beat cop of some kind.
Yeah.
Because you can ride in a car. I guess you have to probably be able to run and jump to catch bad guys.
You know what I really think this is the fact that we didn't know this yet, but that commissioner was dirty and he was aware that it was this guy's partner. If you really think about it, the writers were probably trying to insinuate that he was being buried in the department.
I think you're giving it way too much credit.
No, this is a beautifully written piece of work that it really
was not trying
rewards
to ride the coattails of two other shows that were already clearly very successful and gimmicky at the time.
I can't think of any other shows where there were police officers who rode motorcycles around LA and solved crimes. I don't know what you're talking about.
There were almost no crime shows at all in the 80s.
Yeah, I think I'm probably going to get myself some chips for lunch. I'm kind of craving some chips and salsa.
I really do want some chips and salsa.
Food. We're back to food.
Hey, now we just got to put in murder and we're done with the episode.
Just awkwardly at the end of the show.
Phoning it in.
Murder.
My stomach's growling. This is over.
No.
Okay.
That's not how this works.
Nope. So anyway, he gets in his yellow muscle car, which was pretty cool. It looked like a Mustang, maybe?
I think it was a Mustang GT of some kind.
It was pretty cool. I was way more excited about that car than I was about the motorcycle.
I don't know how he afforded that on a cop's salary.
Well, maybe he wasn't getting some cocaine and.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, those cars were probably like what, $4,000 or $5,000 back then.
Yeah, don't remind me.
It was a different time. It was an innocent time.
It was. So he drives that car into the garage of his building, and Norm Murphy Brown guy shows up again. And he's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And so they start talking, and I notice he just starts walking from his car into the place where are his groceries. He just left me in the car.
No,
it's fine.
I didn't catch that. I thought he had him in his arms.
Nope, didn't. He was just walking.
So he just walks straight into his apartment.
Straight in, and Norm follows him. And he's drinking at that point. They're looking at his trophies for dirt bike racing, which is, to me, like, it reminded me of Tom, right? It reminded me of Tom with his BMX. He probably has trophies or something.
Yeah.
But it's stuff that he got when he was a teenager, because it seems like he even says, by the time you're 22, you're done in this
Yeah, it
field.
lines up pretty well with
Tom, with what he was saying with dirt bikes. And so it's just like, okay, well, why would you cling to that so hard? Like, he says he quit doing that because he wanted to be a cop. It just seems weird that you're showing off your trophy
fair,
you won when you were like 16 or 17 years old.
To be fair, he was in the kitchen getting a beer brand beer out of the fridge. And this is back before they could do all the product placement well. So literally everything in there that's supposed to be a food, like if it's Campbell's, it'll look like a Campbell's can, but it'll just say soup. Which I want to get back to that. I would love to go to a restaurant where the food was just labeled exactly what it is.
Yes. Go to Aldi.
Yeah. I do frequently.
You can just get beer brand beer.
But I always end up with a tent or like a hammock that I didn't know I needed.
It was called hammock.
Hammock.
Hammock brand hammock.
But no, to be fair, I think that Tuttle wandered in through the apartment and beelined for the trophy and picked it up. Because
he's like, so you're a pretty good motorcycle rider, huh?
And he goes, you're not here for the trophies. And then
he says, I'm testing a highly sophisticated piece of equipment.
Are you always this hard on your equipment? It's like
hard
an American
on
Dad.
this. Anyway. So
I don't know where you were going with that.
Norm's got a rockin' station wagon.
It is
and
bad.
they get into he convinces Jesse to get in the station wagon, go with him to the secret lab, the command center, as he calls it.
It's just command
center. Yes. And Jesse goes, wow, it looks like the bridge of the Starship Enterprise.
Yeah. So we know what universe there is.
Oh, and it has like, this is one of those standard 80s things. It's got like the big wall panels that have the light bulb lights, like a light bright.
Yeah, I think they just took them right off the MacGyver set and stuck them right in here for the pilot. Like some part of that was probably from, Star Trek too.
I didn't say the quote again, but I did kind of think, increase the Flash Gordon noise and put more science stuff around.
At least they didn't have like a Tesla coil or one of those like two antennas with the bolt going up it.
Mm-hmm. I wrote on here, I said, oh, the look on Jesse's face when he sees this thing.
Yeah. I mean,
his face just like, it was like, okay, your motivation is you see this motorcycle and it fills you with hope and excitement and you want to ride it. So you can just see him going, reaction shot. And so he literally says, it's a motorcycle.
Yes, he does. He'd already put the beer brand beer down.
Yeah,
now
he
he's
had.
looking at his motorcycle brand motorcycle.
So then Norman goes, here's your workout room. And so then they instantly start
I needed to ask you this, but did it not seem like they had a weird obsession with Jane Fonda?
It was really weird. Really weird. I've recently, for prepping for a Dragon Con panel that we're doing, we had to watch the movie Barbarella. If you've never seen it,
I have not.
Don't. It's really bad. Or really good if you love terrible movies. But
I think they call that Terra good.
It's, whew, Lord.
Or Terra bad.
But yeah, I was never allowed to watch anything in my house with Jane Fonda in it for obvious reasons because my dad's Vietnam vet.
Yeah. So. No, that would have gotten a TV thrown out the window in a lot of houses 100%. In the 80s.
Probably would have gotten grounded.
So that was an interesting move thinking of the time frame that this was. 84, 85. There were still some very strong opinions about her.
Yeah, but she did have that big popular workout series. So they had like
that was when she got back into the public eye.
Yeah. They had a big poster of her in that workout getup, and they did like an 80s montage. Yeah. And I was thinking of the Rocky getting strong now.
Yeah, and he's on like what was supposed to be very high tech and modern equipment, and it looks like if you went into a gym today and it had some of this stuff, you would just go, "Oh no, I'm not working out here."
Around this time is when Norman tells him there's a lot of tech crap that has to get shoehorned into this episode.
So he walks him through some of the bike features?
The bike features. And it's funny because in this episode of this show is like what a lot of pilot episodes are establishing people's personal backgrounds. But instead of spending a lot of time on that, they spend a lot of time establishing this bike. Mm-hmm. So I typed out a lot of the stuff that he said. He says, the friction is almost non-traceable.
Yeah, I couldn't parse that either. I can't.
He's basically saying that there's no friction. Somehow it overcomes friction, and so that's why it can go so fast.
Okay. That's really not that fast. I mean, it's fast for ground speed.
Sure.
But we had prop planes at that time that were faster than that bike.
He said it can do off-road or street use. It can. That's where it shows that animation of it, sort of the suspension changing and moving a little bit. And Jesse says, how fast can it go? And Norman says, about 200 miles per hour for cruising, 300 miles an hour with the hyper thrust.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's when I started thinking, it would be really important to have prescience.
Right, because
to be able to go that fast on a motorcycle.
If you're sharing the road with, other people.
Uh-huh.
And you're going through intersection after intersection blindly.
Uh-huh. In a big city.
It was computer controlled, and he had that big computer with the overview of the entire city.
Because computers.
So your assumption, I think, if you're looking into the poetry and the art that is this episode, is that this machine is aware of where all the cars and pedestrians are, and it is actually, he is no longer controlling the motorcycle in hyperthrust.
The motorcycle is omniscient, is what you're saying.
Well,
the computer
Tuttle's machine is. Okay. So if he were to lose connection with the
I think that
office,
machine is more impressive than the motorcycle itself.
It would have to be to keep track of all. Like, we can't do that now.
Nope. He says the air coils were redesigned to take advantage of negative airflow.
Yes, and they just pop out, and it increases the drag coefficient. Mm-hmm. So I guess they suddenly have traceable friction at that point.
Something.
But he says he can stop on a dime,
Works.
which I have to imagine would be hilarious.
It
doesn't
he would just
seem
like a good
idea. 200 miles an hour.
It's like 200 miles an hour on a bike, and then you stop on a dime. What do you think's going to happen? Like, you don't ever even have to. I've ridden lots of motorcycles.
Hang on, let me call Sir Isaac Newton.
I'm pretty sure you don't want to do that.
Call Isaac Newton? What if he answers? It'd be so creepy.
How do you have his number?
Well, actually,
me and Sir are like this.
Yeah. Me and Sir. Yeah, we just call him Sir. Me and Neil when we're hanging out. DeGrasse Tyson. Careful now. We're very smart.
I also wrote, Norm's brown corduroy jacket.
I kept looking for elbow patches on it. They missed an opportunity.
They really did miss an opportunity. I kept writing, this, that, like so many times. I wrote, the Tangerine Dream music earlier, too. So Jesse is looking for the missing bike. I guess his friend's bike.
So he starts noticing that evidence from the incident that killed Chakotay.
He's doing a shadow investigation because he doesn't think
PR is good for that. But yeah, so he's looking for all these little bits and pieces, and he's noticing that the paper trail's been removed.
Yep. And so he limps around in this junkyard and finds the bike.
Yeah, he's really selling that. Like, did they have closed circuit TV in that junkyard? They
know.
Must have if it was evidence.
I mean, maybe not. It's the 80s.
Yeah, you'd think at some point.
It's like the Dark Ages, right?
It's hard to remember what we did and did not have. Eventually you do get to see that drug dealer's home. Mm-hmm. And I remember seeing across this valley, like this horse farm kind of valley that he lived across, and thinking, no, you could just set up an FBI station right over there with a telescopic lens, and you could see everything going on at this house.
You definitely could. But you would have to suspect him in order to do that, right?
Yeah, I'm sure you'd have to get a judge to clear it. But I was just thinking,
probably
it was
not.
Right out in the open. Well, it was 84, so...
So then he takes that evidence to this friend that he has in the lab, and he's like, hey, can you help me out? And the guy's like, yeah, I guess. He doesn't.
Yeah, the overworked crime lab employee.
Blah, blah, blah.
That's new.
So then the lady yells at him when he goes into his day job. I literally typed lady yells at him. He says that his reason is personal. And finally he tells her, because she's mad that he's not really giving his all to the job.
Did you notice that job? Oddly longing and confused look that the flack gave her? Because she's complaining about not being able to find him to this guy who just is there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then she goes stomping off because she's mad. And then the camera, as fast as the cuts are at the rest of the show, it's like for this stretch of time, they really want you to see that he's not sure what just happened.
He's like a really nerdy looking guy with a weird tie and a vest. And then
he's just like, I wonder if she likes garlic. He's just trying to figure out what he's thinking while he's looking at her walk away.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's weird, and that you get another one of those later in the episode towards the end too. So it's It's just
He's
why.
just like, who is
it's
that
never
guy?
explained. I
Whose
don't know if
cousin is
it
that?
originally used to be in the script and then they just edited all of that out. I don't know, but
I hope this was like a 6-hour power movie. We just got the short version.
it was actually long. It wasn't your standard 42, 45-minute episode.
Well, that was time compression because of the relativistic speeds of the motorcycle.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that was what happened.
He gets pretty sassy with Lady and tells her...
That's the best. And the thing is,
Lady and the bike.
I don't really. I think
is what they should have called this show.
Lady in the bike.
He tells her that his friend was murdered, and because she's like, "Why aren't you giving your all?" and blah blah blah. He's like, "Somebody doesn't want me to find out who actually killed my friend." She's like, "That's a pretty serious accusation. You know, do you have any evidence?" He's like, "That's what I'm trying to get." And then she starts arguing with him, and he goes, "You used to be a reporter, right?" She's like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Doesn't getting to the truth matter to you anymore? Or have you just gotten too good at covering it up?" And it's like, and he walks off in a huff. It's like,
I know.
Burn.
Yeah, it was sick. That's the second time in the show she's been asked, didn't you used to be a reporter?
Yeah. Didn't you used to be somebody?
Yeah.
I used to be somebody.
I could have been a contender.
9 Inch Nails quote, everybody. So this is where they cut to the mansion, and there is a lady.
It's like her mama didn't teach her to lay like that. That's all I'm saying.
The first thing you see is it's a stereotypical mansion, like from the 80s. And they pan out and it's like a swimming pool outside of a mansion. And there's all these ladies in bikinis and like a middle-aged dude, which happens to be Doc Brown, swimming in the pool. Of course, he doesn't look like Doc Brown. He doesn't have the crazy hair, of course. He has like his normal brown hair. And but there's a lady laying on this chaise lounge, and she's like got one leg hanging off, and she looks dead.
Yeah.
You don't ever really get what happened. But the police commissioner walks up to the side of the pool, and Doc swims up to the edge in his little tidy little swimsuit, and he says, "She couldn't take the heat." And then he just moves on, it is. They were flirting, as silly as this show is and fun as this show is, or trying to be. They were flirting with the kind of a dark concept there of like he's providing these ladies drugs and they're addicted to them because they have that lady that walks up at the end of the conversation and says, "I feel sick. I need more medicine. I need more medicine."
And he just kind of shoves her out of the way.
Aside.
And just, get out of my way. He sounded really gravelly in this.
He did.
I don't know what was going on.
And he tells his thug at that point that he wants him to kill Jesse Mock because the police commissioner had come in to tell him that Jesse was sniffing around.
Yeah.
And so, of course, the Doc Brown has to take care of that. This is where it cuts back to Jesse trying on his helmet. Again, it's more tech talk where he's like telling him all these things that the helmet can do.
He's also gazing longingly at Jane Fonda again.
Yeah, through the helmet.
Yeah.
He's like, anything you see, I can see.
And it's recorded.
Like, no, I mean, it seems like it would only record what the helmet was aimed at. Like, because that's how cameras work. It doesn't actually go into your brain and figure out what you're looking at.
But that's what they kind of sell that's what the helmet's doing. Like
that
some
is
kind
what
of eye tracking.
That's right.
Because
Mm-hmm.
it's how he targets that particle beam.
And then my favorite scene in the entire episode happens where...
Are you talking about the old
bubble tube.
Tube full of foam?
So... You remember how awkward that scene in Empire Strikes Back is where Luke is like floating in that tank and everyone's like looking at him in like this weird diaper?
Yeah, even as a child, I was not completely comfortable with that.
Yeah, it was
scene.
a little freakish and weird. This is pretty similar. It's like a big...
And Mark Hamill almost died in that scene because like shortly after they got him out, one of the lights fell into the tank.
Oh, God.
Like with electricity and everything.
So I call this the bubble tube. And he says, Norm says, we need an exact body mold for your racing suit.
I don't understand that.
I don't either, but I guess they thought it would just look cool. So they have this guy standing in this like tube, think Empire Strikes Back, and it's filling up with suds.
But standing straight up.
He's
not
just
laying
standing
back.
straight up, and he's wearing like
Boxer
tidy
briefs.
whities.
Yeah.
They're black, but they're, the tight ones. And it's just slowly or fairly quickly actually filling up with bubbles. And then it comes up to the very bottom of his chin and stops there. And he has this whole scene where he's like that. And anyway, this then goes to Jesse getting attacked by another bonker on a bike, as I like to call them.
Bunker on a bike.
They're very colorfully dressed in yellow and red racing
it's
suits.
the motocross, like, protective
Very
gear.
motocross, yeah. And Jesse hits him with a crowbar, but somehow that doesn't...
No, that's his cane.
Oh, okay.
He hits him across his shooting arm.
Because he was holding
cane.
a crowbar earlier, and I was just like, is this going to lead somewhere?
No, it's his cane, I think. Unless he picked a crowbar up from his tool set or something while he was working.
Another thing that was laid
Remember,
in...
it broke in half after he hit him. He just had, it was like a half.
I don't remember that.
Okay.
I wasn't. There's a line early in the episode when Jesse is saying he won't work with Norm on this project, where he says, I don't trust the feds, or I don't want to work with the feds because you can never trust what their real agenda is.
You can't tell what side they're on.
Yeah, you can't tell what side they are. And so it's like, is that going to pay off in some way later? And it doesn't at all pay off. So
I've only seen like 3 more episodes, so I don't know if they ever. This is before
There's
they
no
got into
metaplot,
the
dude.
long story arcs.
No metaplots.
Well, I mean, why would you metaplot when each individual story is so
Epic.
yes and well written and sticks with you?
That's
like,
right.
You just can't stop.
Really does.
Believe
That guy gets away, and then
it. He gives up pretty easily on that assassination
Doc
attempt.
and the commish, Doc and the commish could be a great
Really good.
title for a show. Doc and the commish have a chat about the commish pulling out. That's literally what I typed. And the Doc won't allow him to pull out.
Nope. He slams him face down on the hood of a car.
And carves up the car with a screwdriver or
It is
something.
a fairly nice Mercedes Benz.
It was.
It has a little pain associated with it, and this is, I think, Doc at his creepiest. He really sells. Like, for a minute, you wonder if he's about to just carve up this guy's face.
He
with
does a really
screwdriver.
good job in this episode. I'll say he did a fine job with what he was given, certainly. So this is where then they cut back to Jesse and Norm talking. Norm's like, oh, all this cocaine and money had been disappearing from the police evidence. This is the perfect job for Street Hawk. And so he gets all suited up, and then he rides out, and the way he rides out is very Batman.
Yes.
Because there's like a big billboard
It's a
that
knockoff
slides
Moxie
open.
ad, like Moxie Cola.
Yep. And he jumps out, or as I apparently type, he humps out.
Just humps right on out.
And you said something like rough cut right around there. I don't know why.
It's because the doors fly open, and then it's not directly after that he comes through the exit. So there is a rough cut right there where you can see the camera jump like maybe a millimeter, just a little bit to kind of throw you off. So it's sort of like when Luke first fires up the lightsaber and you see his hand jerk a little bit
That's
because
right.
they've just cut and then put the new thing in his hand.
Right.
And it was pretty obvious.
Yep. But
it's 84.
The 80s.
Yeah.
Whatever.
They're doing the best they could.
And so they are going to kind of use this opportunity to test out the bike. And so this is one of the funniest parts, too, of the show where he drives out. I wrote, he drove onto the set of a music video with smoke, lights, and rain. He's like driving out, and it's just beautifully lit. I mean, it looks like a music video.
It deserves an award because I was suddenly like, oh, I like this show. This is pretty cool. It's almost like a Top Gear episode where they've got the car and they've got it surrounded by flames or something, and everything's perfectly light balanced.
Smoke machines, and
the film is perfectly exposed.
It's great.
And it was flinging water particles up in the air.
Yeah.
Even he makes the comment that when he went onto that set, one of the grips was like, "No, this is money.
Yeah,
like, they're spending a lot of money on this show."
And they're doing he's doing a lot of wheelies and like trick things with the bike, but the section of it's called phase 1.
And
chase maneuvers.
Yeah, chase maneuvers.
But I wrote chase maneuvers look a lot like beauty shots.
Yeah. And they reuse those shots constantly in the show.
They do. And then he says, okay, the next phase 2 is hyper thrust. All you have to do is hold on.
Well, when you go from like 25 miles an hour to 300 miles an hour.
Yeah. It is so insane looking. It's really funny.
I loved it.
It's the best part of this.
It was really
that
early
and the bubble
on.
tube.
It was really early on for them to get that right because you know that they just filmed regular speed and then sped it up in the camera. But even when they had the static shot from his handlebars up towards his helmet, they did like a weird exposure trick where it was sort of like the shutter speed slowed down so everything kind of blurred and shook and traced little lines. It was a reasonable, I think, facsimile of
I
going
think they did
that
a good
fast
job with
for
the effect.
1984.
Yeah.
And those two things put together, the glamour shots of the bike and that, were kind of like when I went, oh, I kind of like this show.
That's the part the 7-year-old is going to remember, you know? Like, anyway, so then he finds out somehow that there is a robbery in progress. So
he just drives by it.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He sees it.
Well, I mean, there's just a guy shooting a shotgun into the air outside of Wine in Liquor Basket. Yeah, apostrophe in. And they're giving each other high fives in the car, like, we did it.
Yep. And so then Street Hawk drives up right in front of the car and starts shooting them with lasers.
Just like particle beam out the front. And
then he says, no charge for the tune-up.
I'm like, oh, this is going to be that kind of show.
And then he uses the quote-unquote vertical lift, which means that from a standstill, he can jump over the car with the bike and then just ride off, like using the hyperspeed or whatever, into the distance and disappear. So, and then there was this weird thing. They cut to a press conference talking about what happened, and the one guy goes, "What about the masked man on the motorcycle?" And the police commissioner says, when approached for questioning, he fled. And then the guy goes, "You mean he flew?" And then everybody starts laughing, and it's like, that wasn't funny. That wasn't even.
There's a lot of that in this show where they try to sell jokes a little too hard.
There's so many weird things that they cut then to the lab guy who was cooking chicken and rice soup in a beaker.
Yep.
And he gives him the findings of his investigation into the paint chips that he got off the bike, that Jesse got off the bike. And he's analyzed them and found out that they came from a custom paint shop. That is what he came up with from that.
Well, he says, it's not my job to tell you where they came from, just what they are made of.
Uh-huh.
Which, that's not how crime labs work. They do tell you as much as they can.
That's right. So Lady then comes in.
I've seen bones. I know how this works.
That is exactly what being a forensic anthropologist is like.
Absolutely.
So Lady, we find out at this point that Lady's name is Sandra McCoy because he's sitting next to like a cubicle or something that's got her name on the glass on the top part of it. It says Sandra McCoy, PR. And then he shows her the paint chips and he starts looking in the phone book and saying, I need to find some places that are custom paint shops. And he's like, I can't do it by myself.
Yeah, he's like,
and he looks up at her and she's like, are you asking me for help? Great.
Yeah, it's this chemistry is just palpable.
And he's still really committed to that limp. And he's like, then there's another weird montage of them going to different paint shops to try to figure out which place the paint chips came from. Like they could tell them that from paint chips. But anyway, they're playing a jazzy off-brand version of Bad to the Bone during
that was uncomfortable. I don't like that beat anyway. Like it got overplayed. She comes
across the shop and the guy's like, yeah, I remember this truck. It was a big black monster truck. And the guy paid in cash and da-da-da. So the guy that owns that Mercedes over there knows that guy. Let me go see if I can find his name. And he walks out and she's just standing there and she looks over at the car, the Mercedes that we recently saw get carved up by Doc Brown. She goes over and she starts rifling through the glove box. And the commissioner comes up behind her with a gun. There's a lot that happens in this episode. Do you notice that?
It occurred to me about 5 minutes ago. I'm like, wow, there's
so much.
But yeah, so he kidnaps her, makes her drive to the Malibu,
mansion,
Beverly Hills mansion somewhere.
The pool mansion with the drugs.
Mansion with the dead,
and Doc Brown.
Dead lady. And and Doc Brown.
That's right.
I need to talk to you about these drugs.
So in the meantime, Street Hawk gets pulled off of his interviewing for paint chips people because Norm has a job. And he's like, the van, they're transporting the cocaine and money. You got to go out and like see if you can make sure that they don't get hijacked. And so he jumps and gets on Street Hawk and he goes out and he sees these two dirt bikes with the bonkers like driving them. And then he sees the black truck as he's driving past and he's #triggered. And he takes off after the bikes. They do this crazy motorcycle chase through a bunch of pedestrian areas. He comes up to this place that looks like a big tunnel entrance that has a lot of graffiti on there. On one side it says Ford, and on the other side it says Chevy Power, which I guess in this part of LA is what passes for gangs.
These were the big issues that everybody was fighting
No
over.
Crips and Bloods.
No.
It's Ford and Chevy.
You're
edgy.
in Chevy Town.
He chases them through this dark underground tunnel. This is the part that's supposed to be like Star Wars.
And there's like metal beams supporting the tunnel that are perfectly spaced out and alternating sides. So he has to swerve constantly to get through it. And he's not allowed to fire his particle beam because the space is too confined.
That's right. That's exactly right.
A stream of particles.
The two
might
guys
take up too
end
much
up
space.
like going out the other side of the tunnel and get caught by the cops because Norm has called the cops in the meantime, and Jesse has sort of wrecked in the tunnel, and he doesn't come out, so he doesn't get caught because he's a vigilante, and that would be bad. The black truck is looking on with Doc in it, and
once again, another case of them just like acting like something like that can be that stealthy. Like that truck just kind of crept up like a person and was just peeking over the fence.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
It's very weird. But vehicles in the show are kind of treated like individual people.
They
you
are.
notice that?
Unless they're a police car or police van.
So in the meantime, Lady is at the mansion with the commish.
And she really doesn't like the commissioner.
She doesn't like the commish.
That look
she doesn't
she was
really
giving
like
him
anybody.
was-
She's kind of got the resting face.
You just hear.
Yeah. Jesse and Norm argue about him seeing the truck, the black truck. And he's like, I need you to show me the footage. And he's like, we don't have time for this. So Norm is being a real tool.
He really is.
He's like,
there's no reason to withhold the footage.
Yeah. Anyway, Jesse ends up locking him in the workout room
With the Jane Fonda poster.
with the Jane Fonda poster, which they show again.
Yep.
And he steals the bike and he goes off because he figures out the license plate information and the location of where the mansion is. And so he takes off to go to the mansion. Norm is breaking out of the room, and this is where it starts cutting back and forth between him trying to get everything working again because Jesse has sabotaged.
Like he's pulled panels out of the control center.
Yeah. So he's sitting there, Norm is sitting there like trying to rehook up all these.
Oh, it's painful.
It's so long, and it's just like G6 goes to 5B yellow, and you're like, what are we playing?
It's like chess, but with colored wires.
It's ridiculous.
And it's boring.
It's super boring. He's watching on the screen where the bike's going, but he can't get Jesse on the microphone part.
Yeah, he's only got the video feed.
JM, so he shows up, Jesse ends up showing up at the mansion, and we know there's about to be a showdown, but then he instantly gets shot off the bike.
Yeah, like he's got a grenade launcher.
Yeah, instantly. So even though I kept thinking the show is called Street Hawk, so you'd think that this whole thing would be a big chase scene. But it's him running around in his motorcycle uniform with the big black helmet on, which has to impede his visibility, and running through the wooded grounds, and like people are shooting at him and stuff, and he gets in a stable. The lady is in there. She has escaped. She tries to hit him with a shovel. He never reveals his identity to her.
No, but it's kind of funny because he's got sort of a southern drawl. I don't think it would have been that hard for her to work it out.
No.
But
I mean, it's not, he's no Clark Kent.
no, he is not.
He gets out, he gets on a motorcycle, he gets back on the motorcycle, he chases the big black truck into the big finale, music, there's more crates, there's like, he jumps, it says jumps all the cars. Does Jesse jump over cars again?
There's another scene with wood crates and vegetables, although I don't think they even bothered to fill the crates this time. They were just empty
it was
crates.
empty crates and boxes just
they
flying
were just
everywhere.
stacking in the middle of a dirt road in the middle of, the Los Angeles desert.
Yeah. At some point, the truck somehow gets lift and jumps through a billboard. The truck does. I don't really know how. Then the truck is chasing Jesse. So it's like Jesse's chasing the truck, and then the truck starts chasing Jesse. This is the third funniest part of this episode. Alarms start going off for Norman. It's like making this klaxon sound, right? And he's like, Jesse, don't backflip the bike. It won't work.
Yeah, I know what you're about to do.
I know what you're going to do. And because Jesse is like racing toward the edge of a cliff.
He's racing towards the San Andreas fault line.
Okay, is that what that is?
Yeah.
And so the black truck is following him, hot on his tail. And he totally does.
He throws those air brakes on.
That's right. And he jumps up and literally does a backwards 360, like he's like going backwards on a roller coaster.
Yeah, like one of those cages at the circus where the bikes go around and around.
He jumps backwards over the black truck and ends up behind the black truck.
Like on two wheels, perfectly fine.
Perfectly fine. No damage to the bike because gravity is not a problem, along with friction. And then the black truck goes over the cliff, and Jesse comes to a screeching stop right at the edge of the cliff and watches the black truck just crash down and just roll down the hill. and it shockingly doesn't explode.
Yeah, they missed an opportunity there.
They really did. And then
but they trashed that truck.
They did.
It is a nice truck, and they just wreck it.
They did. The PR people come in at the very last scene, and he keeps saying, no comment, no comment. And then he says, that's the last we'll ever see of Street Hawk. And that's the last line of the show.
And it's a freeze frame of, Jesse on Street Hawk flying out of that exit billboard.
That's right.
The Moxie soda.
So, Street Hawk.
It was fun. I think if I wouldn't spend $1 bajillion trying to get this, but if you have an opportunity to check it out, definitely do. If anything, I think there are a lot of really kind of unexpected 80s cameos in it. So we talked about George Clooney. There's more. They kind of had a little carousel go through of different people. And the premise for the show feels like it had more legs than it got a chance to have. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of reasons why people have thought that it is, whether it's the main, Rex and his charisma not being what they wanted it to be because he wasn't Hasselhoff or Clooney. I happen to think it's just there was a big issue with the suspension of disbelief that a motorcycle could be useful, as useful as they depicted it. So, like I talked about earlier, him sneaking up on the motorcycle has to be a part of everything he does. So he sneaks up on people on a motorcycle that is on and loud. He goes into buildings with it and fires his machine gun, but he has to point the whole motorcycle at him. I think today, if you were doing this, it would be the kind of thing where he would burst through the window on the motorcycle, and in midair, he would fly off the motorcycle. And then the other part of his abilities would be his, hand-to-hand fighting or other skills that he would use.
Yeah, maybe he needed to also be a ninja.
Yes, that would be incredible.
That would have been amazing.
I mean, they even used Snake Eyes
Ninja bike
in India.
They could have called it Ninja Bike.
Oh my gosh. And then there was a bike called a Ninja?
Or Ninja Cycle.
Yeah.
Right?
And then that could be like this repeating cycle of stories.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wonder if maybe the reason it didn't work as well is because Knight Rider was the most successful of the three of these shows,
the
right?
The vehicle shows.
And I think maybe the reason why is because everybody drives a car.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody drives a helicopter airplane thing, right?
Speak for yourself.
But, I mean, not many people have that experience. But that's just cool because it's not common, right? But the motorcycle thing is just like, I don't know if as many people, I don't know.
They talk about how in Italy it was huge.
Exactly, yes.
Because everybody there had a motorcycle, whether it's a moped or whatever. It's a very common way to get around Italy and other parts of Europe. I mean, it's an iconic image of even English and French, message carriers in World War II. You think of the Triumph motorcycle, you think of all that kind of stuff. So Rex said it best, in the United States, it's an affectation. It's something you choose to do. You get a bike to make a point. Over in Europe, it is kind of how you work. It's how you get your 9 to 5. It's how you get back and forth from your job. So,
and all of that information came from a documentary called Making of a Legend, which is a 41-minute documentary that is on the Shout Factory release of this show. Mm-hmm. That just came out. I think it's the most recent release. I think there was a previous release.
I think it was 09 or something like that.
But it's got some interesting special features that, have interviews with a lot of the people involved and things like that. So if you're interested in this show at all, you may want to check that out. Any final thoughts, Aaron, on Street Hawk?
No, I'm probably going to finish watching all 13 episodes, though. It makes a great kind of background thing. And like I said, I really do love when he goes into hyperthrust and just takes off somewhere. There's something I know that 7-year-old me would have thought that was the coolest thing in the world if I had seen it. There
was one scene in particular where he's in the full costume. He's got the black helmet on. He's on the bike that's all black.
Yeah, you looked at me, actually, and said, he looks kind of badass.
He looks kind of badass. I think so. But like you said, it's just a black jumpsuit with some silver piping on it.
Yeah, I could have done without the silver on the shoulders.
I kind of liked it.
Did you really?
I did.
Okay.
Weirdly. I don't know why.
It's all right. Takes all kinds. I'm not calling you weird or anything.
I mean, I am weird, though. It's fine. All right. Well, thanks, everyone, for listening to our podcast today, and we will catch you on the next one.
We will.
Bye.
Bye.